You are listening to the Kelly Confidential podcast with Kelly Wilkes. This is episode 40. Welcome to the Kelly Confidential Show, where we talk negotiation essentials and those crucial conversations empowering extraordinary women. Real women, real issues. Let's jump in. Hi, friends. Glad to have you here. How's your week going? And what a week indeed, right? Depending on where you live, you've likely been, inundated with news of the political polls in Europe, the fight for the keys to number 10 Downing Street in Britain, or the latest drama unfolding in American politics. It's impossible not to be exposed to these topics in some way. And amidst this, there's another power struggle I'm sort of seeing on LinkedIn lately, which is the pumping up of women in DEI topics where people are grasping onto an article, and if the stats or the sums favor their own narrative or agenda, they seem to become fact, really, for everyone, even if they're not fact. I'll give you an example. I came across a feed yesterday by a woman coach who was challenging stats she'd seen about the gender gap, and she was reporting that the gender gap was much less of an issue than people thought, that women more than men were negotiating salaries, that women were taking greater control of corporate leadership roles, etc. And she was saying all of this in support of her pitch that women are mastering it, and she was there to help them to the next stage. Now, this really floored me, and I'm keen to hear what you think, so please do drop me some comments. But yeah, this floored me for two reasons. One, because all three of her claims about women beating the gender gap metrics in the specifics that she offered, and they didn't contain any numbers or stats or citations to any governing bodies or anything like that. They were all factually inaccurate. And I eat, sleep, and breathe women's pay and power equity stats all the time, every week. I have to. How credible would I be if I wasn't doing my homework and then touting all this information to you all? So I have to make sure that I'm, checking my numbers. And so I rely on the flow of data from places like nonprofits, government statistics, business indexes, and oversight ombudsman to verify really any position or problem I'm putting out there. And even in the richest and most developed nations on this planet, women are nowhere near parity with their male counterparts. Ladies, we are double digits away in all major categories: salaries, property ownership, corporate leadership posts, a stat which contracted in the last 2 years, I should mention, meaning it's gotten worse, not better. Access to investor capital, seats within national cabinets like parliament or congressional seats, and I could go on, but it's just depressing. And to support my point, I've got the latest 2024 annual gender report here from the World Economic Forum, link in the show notes. And it shows in texts, charts, graphs that the pace of change in gender parity has slowed and continues to remain slow since pre-COVID. In the last year's report, in the 2023 report, the rate of parity globally was expected to be achieved 131 years from now. So this is parity across all categories. So pay, property rights, right to voting, social rights, and so forth. All of those categories, it's going to take women 131 years. That's just so crazy to think about. Anyway, that was what last year's report told us. And so this year's report, the one that was published just a couple weeks ago on the 11th of June, shows that it has slowed to 134 years. That's right. Globally, women have been set back another 3 years because of slow change, progress in traction, or even the reversal of rights in some places. So it's going to be 134 years before girls and women globally are treated as full equals. And there have been numerous other reports out this year. The UN Gender Index and the annual OECD reports are both good ones to check out. And they support these statistics around the slower pace of change for women's rights and equality, spotlighting the countries that are trying to fix it. And among the most progressive in overall scores, so this includes pay, social rights, access to vote, Iceland and Norway remain in the top 2 positions with around 90% parity. And by contrast, the US, which might be a surprise for some and maybe not for others, but the US, as an example, it trails quite significantly in 43rd position. And they're trailing 7 slots behind their Canadian neighbors. So just putting that out there, you can see that in the report. It's true data. And these rankings have also been consistent for years. So you can Google at any point any of these reports going back year on year, and you can see that they've pretty much stayed in most of these positions. And yet this woman and on this post yesterday, she was just absolute that we're all out there, smashing it, and we should just get off our bandwagon. So yeah, not sure what she was smoking, but I was floored. And reason too that I found her post jarring was because it minimizes the gravity of what's still in front of us. It undermines the extraordinary work going on within the UN women's caucuses globally, along with the hard-fought efforts in national politics and grassroots communities in some of the most underrepresented and challenged cities, villages, countries, fighting to give women a voice. And I'm not trying to be righteous here, neither am I trying to boil the ocean, but we can't isolate certain rich countries, developed countries, and say they're doing well, and then ignore the vast majority of women in the rest of the world who are decades away from achieving the same partial progress, not even full progress, but partial progress that we've secured, that we're enjoying. So that brings me to my topic today. I know you're going, Kel, what does this have to do with anything? And so what I want to talk about is that it's not enough to have ambition about your aspirations and your goals without execution. Strike that. Without the right execution, right? Because you can be putting some effort in, but even if that effort's pointing in the wrong direction, you're just wasting your own time. And again, I think to be ambitious, if your execution is all wrong, if it's rubbish, then yeah, you're just burning your own energy. And the reason I say this is because I could tell this woman was proud and she loved her work. You could see that she was passionate about what she was trying to convey. But it means nothing if, number one, your data is wrong, right? So, be thorough in your job. Make sure that you're getting the data right. And number two, if you're not doing anything about it to make it any better. So an idea without follow through is just hope, really, isn't it? It's good to have hope, of course, but it doesn't do anything for you without action. We need action. Right, so let's apply that to your deal making. How do you go from idea to agreement? Well, that's a whole course in itself, but I'm going to give you the highlights. So here they are. Are you ready? Let's jump in. Right, so number one, first up, getting clear on your purpose. Understanding and articulating your purpose is the cornerstone of any negotiation. Begin by defining your goals clearly. What do you want to achieve? What are your priorities? How much do you want to spend, or how much do you want them to spend? What's your sales target? How does this support that? These are all the questions that you will need to consider. What is your purpose? What's your goal? And establishing a clear purpose helps in focusing your direction of travel. And writing it down keeps you honest, especially when the haggling goes in a different direction, which they do sometimes. So this keeps you from getting sidetracked. And so here are key actions for getting your purpose right. Number one, write down your primary objectives. Always a good plan. Identify secondary goals and potential concessions, and create a mission statement for the negotiation to keep yourself aligned, maybe your team aligned. You'll know how much is too much, but I think those couple of actions will definitely help in getting that clarity. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, you want to understand the negotiation styles. Now, most people fall into one of two negotiation styles. And again, I'm fast tracking this guidance because you could do a whole afternoon on this topic alone. But this should help. Simplistically, they are either competitive or collaborative. And again, I'm truncating a lot of stuff here, but this is just to help get your mind around these things. Most people will fall into these kind of two high-level buckets. And then there are, of course, layers within each of those. Now, competitive deal makers should not be confused with aggressive deal makers, because let's be honest, that's old school and, it gives you limited returns. You can be highly focused and ambitious, i.e. competitive, and still be open to collaboration. But these folks tend to move quickly and will likely push you through the process to meet their goals. Pacing, patience, question asking, all of these will help you to slow that pace if needed until you're comfortable that they're operating in a framework that works for you too. Okay, so that's a competitive type deal maker. The second is collaborative. And again, this isn't code for accommodating. In fact, I would say there really is no place for an accommodating mindset in negotiation, because that just means you're going through the motions and conceding in a purposeful way. Studies have shown that women in particular have been really taught and conditioned to be more accommodating in their styles. And this is a byproduct of being taught to value being liked as children. And there are many studies that show that this actually kicks in around the age of 8 for girls. Again, that's a whole topic for another conversation, but women do tend to show more accommodating styles in their negotiations. And this is exacerbated by the win-win belief system, which I fundamentally believe holds women back. I think we should get rid of the win-win belief system and focus on a purpose-based belief system. You can listen to my June podcast where I talk about that. Anyway, a collaborative negotiator will confidently pace the deal making through structured questions, playback, more questions, idea dropping, and vision building. Critical because you want to help your counterpart to see what the adapted world looks like, where you can bridge, both shores. The book Start With No by Jim Camp covers the concept of vision building really, really well. So that's one to check out, and I'll put that in the show notes. And keep in mind that underneath these two styles, every negotiator is unique. We're all people at the end of the day. So irrespective of the person, be respectful, curious about them, and try and validate them. You don't have to agree with their view of the world every time, but validating their right to an opinion and how they feel, everyone deserves that, and it will really serve you. It will make it easier to find that common ground. Okay, so your actions for this second item. Assess your own negotiating style and its strengths and weaknesses. That's important. So not only are you trying to assess your counterpart, you obviously need to do some self-assessment of your own. And I've talked about this a few times. The book Getting to Yes by Fisher and Urey is a classic, and it will help you with some of those role types. And I think from a self-assessment perspective and a psychological perspective, the book by George Kohlreiser, Hostage at the Table, is an excellent book if you want to understand more about the psychology of conflict and negotiation. And the other things you will want to do, the activities you will want to do, practice your rapport and trust building. These are the bedrock features of successful negotiations. Creating positive regard with your counterpart can lead to more open and honest communication. I mean, it's just vital in any relationship, but it's particularly important in deal making. And you want to develop strategies to adapt your approach. So don't remain stubborn. Stubbornness will not serve you in any negotiation. But understanding the traits and the approaches, the negotiation approaches, and understanding how to build trust, all of these will help you to be a more adaptable negotiator. And yeah, so moving on to number 3. You need to understand the bargaining range and tradables. Knowing your bargaining range, so this is the spectrum between your minimum acceptable outcome and your optimal goal, so your most desired outcome, is essential. This range helps in setting realistic expectations and helps you to craft a flexible yet strategic approach, because options are your friend. Remember that. You always want to go to the table with options. And so the best way to tackle this is to plot it out. Plot it out, write it down, capture what you have that you're willing to trade, and also the stepped exchanges you anticipate need to happen to be able to make offers within that range, right? So you might have 2 or 3 things that you know you can offer and trade on. Those are important. Those are called tradables. And there are certain times within the deal exchange, the dialogue exchange, that will be appropriate for you to make those trades in an offer. Potential tradables include things like price, units of measure, delivery terms, service level agreements, time, access arrangements, and schedules if you're dealing with a divorce and maybe you're looking at the custody arrangements. And then you want to rank these based on their value to you and to your counterpart. Better yet, download my Tradables Deal Planner. It's free. It gives you an editable tool that you can work with. I'll include that in the show notes. Okay. And then number 4, let's move on. Number 4 to navigating objections and intransigence. Objections, that's hard to say. Objections and intransigence are inevitable in any negotiation. The ability to navigate these without derailing the process is so important. Effective handling of objections involves patience, empathy, strategic problem solving. Now, some of the more common objections, which you should plan for, include things like it's too expensive, and then it's too cheap, or it's too long, it's too short, it's too demanding, it's too indifferent. You can see the poles here. These are all common objections. They're the extremes of whatever it is you're in discussion over. And one way of dealing with this is to keep checking in with your counterpart. So, for example, you might say, how does that sound for you? Or how is that feeling for you? Or are you able to help me understand where that sits with you? Does that make sense? Are you with me? So another of the most effective ways that experienced negotiators deal with this is to call out the objection before it's even stated. Like saying to someone who is perhaps budget focused and doesn't like the figure you've quoted, you might say, now I know that cost is an issue for you and this might seem dear, and I'm not offended if you say so, but could you help me to understand where you're at? So some variation of that can be really effective because it puts the objection on the table. And so the next path will get you to where their real issue lies, the real pain point for them. And that information is valuable. Why? Well, because it helps you to narrow the viable range and build a vision for agreement from there. It gives you valuable information about, where they're trading and where their thinking is at. And you can help problem solve with them and search out that common ground. One of the other often underused but powerful tools is silence. Silence is a profound connector insofar as if you can do it politely and wait in the discomfort yourself, because sitting in silence, especially with somebody that you only know professionally, it can be really uncomfortable. But it can be really powerful as an enabler. And so if you on the back of a question, maybe if you go silent for a moment and wait, your counterpart will fill that space. They just will, because they won't be expecting the silence and they won't like it. And it's just human instinct to fill it. And what will come next will be some honest feedback, some honest either questioning or statements. And that's important because they will fill that space with valuable information about their true pain point, which will be something around cost or time or perhaps another bargaining attribute. And that helps you, again, to try and deal with objections, or more importantly, it helps you to bridge the gap that might be there to a vision that works for both of you. It's a great connector. So often, inexperienced negotiators will hold out for too long, keeping their cards really close to their chest. But in doing that, they just prolong a deal that you might be willing to offer them. So if you kind of see some of that intransigence setting in and some of that stubbornness setting in, offer some of these connectors, the terms that I gave you an example about a moment ago, and also silence. Apply these actions in your deal making and you will be well and truly on your way from idea to reality, no longer a dream. But importantly, remember when you do reach agreement that the negotiation doesn't end when the ink reaches the paper. If this is a long-term relationship, like a business agreement or a child arrangement agreement, perhaps following a divorce, follow-up is just as important as the original deal itself. It ensures that the terms can stand up, that onward actions are implemented smoothly, and that any residual teething issues are sorted out, they're promptly addressed. In short, get everything in writing, set up regular checkpoints to monitor that everyone's happy, and keep the communication channels open to demonstrate that you value this relationship and you'll be there if issues arise. Negotiation, like any framework you put into action, is both an art and a science. By embracing these principles that I've given you, so clarity of purpose, understanding negotiation styles, building trust and rapport, knowing the bargaining range and creating tradables, navigating objections, and ensuring thorough follow-up. All of these things will help you to transform the ideation phase into execution and ultimately into a successful deal. And by doing it properly, don't shortcut it. Make sure you do the work and you are accurate in your representation, your data, and all of that is sound. If you do it properly, you can build strong, lasting relationships that really pave the way for, future business and prosperity. And that's the kind of reputation you want for the long term. And that's all for me. So good luck. Thanks so much. And until next time.